Hi guys, and welcome back to I Speak English. My name's Hayley, and in this lesson I'm going to be showing you 20 really common phrasal verbs that you could use in your Cambridge B2 exam. So we're going to be taking a look at these by topic. We're going to take a look at 5 different topics, super common topics that are going to come up in your exam. So they're going to be really useful, and I'm going to show you them in different parts of the exam. So I'll show you how to use them in speaking, how you could use them in different writing tasks like your essay or your review, and also keyword transformation as well. So we're going to take a look at them in lots of different exam contexts, and I'm going to be testing you. You're going to get a chance to practice the phrasal verbs that you learn during this video too. So make sure that you don't skip, make sure that you practice. That's the main point of phrasal verbs, to kind of get to use them as much as you can. Before we do take a look, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and do give this video a like if you find it useful. It just helps it to reach more people so that they can see this video and get some preparation for their exam as well. So give me a little like, hit the subscribe button, and we're going to get started. Alright, let's get started with our phrasal verbs then. So first of all, you might not know what a phrasal verb is, so let's take a brief look. I'm going to explain to you quickly. Phrasal verbs are, first of all, very difficult for a lot of English learners. It's basically a verb with a preposition attached to it, like at, on, in, out. And this preposition basically changes the meaning completely of the verb. As I said, they're very difficult. They also often have a lot of different meanings depending on the context that you're using them in. The meanings might change depending on where you put a pronoun, if you put the pronoun in the middle of the verb and the preposition, if you put it after the verb and preposition. But the main thing with phrasal verbs is they're very common in speaking. You hear these a lot. If you watch movies and TV shows, if you listen to podcasts, you will hear native speakers use them all the time. Maybe 2 or 3 per sentence sometimes. So they're very, very essential to speaking in English, and that's why you're tested on them in the exam. And that's why they're really important for your B2 exam. Okay, so let's take a look at some phrasal verbs then. If you're still not sure what one is, I'm going to show you an example now. We're going to look at our first topic, which is studying. So this is a really common topic in the B2 exam. Education, studying, you often get asked about it in your speaking exam. So they might say, one of the questions they might ask you is, how long have you studied English? That's often a very common question in speaking part 1, for example. One phrasal verb you could use here is brush up on. Okay, really common phrasal verb, brush up on. And it basically just means to revise. It's another way of saying revise, okay? So you can use this as a synonym. So whenever, if you want to talk and you're thinking of the word revise, just try and switch that in your brain for the phrasal verb brush up on. Just try and switch it over. And you'll just sound a little bit more natural. And you'll also just get more points in your exam if you use it. So if they ask you the question in your speaking exam, if they ask you the question, how long have you studied English? You could say, for example, I've been studying English for a few years, consistently, but I also brushed up on a bit of grammar before this exam, or before the exam. Okay, so to brush up on, revise. You could brush up on grammar, you could brush up on your English. Anything that you need to study, you would brush up on. Mathematics, science, whatever it is. So brush up on, that's our first phrasal verb, specifically for studying. Our second one, again for studying, is go over, which literally means to study. Again, it's a synonym for study. So there are a few phrasal verbs in English that do have really simple, like one-word synonyms, like go over, for example, study. Some of them, which we'll see later, are a lot more specific. But these ones are really good because, again, you can just switch out that word, study, for go over, and it makes sense. So a place where you often get tested on phrasal verbs is use of English, specifically your keyword transformation task, which is part 4 of your use of English exam. So let's take a look. I've got an example here. Let's have a look. So if your first sentence was, I need to study my notes again, and you get the preposition over, that means you probably need a phrasal verb. Top tip for keyword transformation, if you do get a preposition as your keyword, you probably need a phrasal verb. They're testing you on a phrasal verb. Okay. So we've got over. We know that go over means study, so we know we have to replace that. Okay. Then we've got she told me that. So you can see here we've got reported speech, and in the first one we don't. So that means we need reported speech here and go over. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 seconds to see if you can complete this on your own. If you want, you can write the answer in the comments if you think you know. I'm going to give you 5 seconds, take a look, see if you can complete it, and then I'll give you the answer. All right, so off you go. All right, so your 5 seconds are up. What do you reckon? What did you put for this one? She told me that she needed to go over her notes. Okay, so we needed to put reported speech, as you know. You need to put the verb 1/10 back into the past, so need becomes needed. Okay, we know that study had to be replaced with go over. So she needed to go over. And then, as usual, with reported speech, you need to change your pronouns as well, depending on who the person is. Because we have she, we also needed to change this pronoun to her. Okay, she needed to go over her notes. So that was our answer. So that's how they might test you on phrasal verbs. Okay, our second phrasal verb, go over, means to study. All right. Okay, moving on, our third phrasal verb then is fall behind. Okay, very common for studying. Fall behind is when you don't do something fast enough, or let's say to the appropriate level. Okay, you can use this for studying. You can also use it for work as well. Okay, so you can fall behind with studying. You can fall behind with coursework. You can fall behind with emails. You could fall behind with a report. So anything you need to study or any kind of work stuff you have to do as well, you could fall behind if you're not doing it as fast as you should do it. Like you have a deadline and you don't meet that deadline, then you fall behind. Okay. An example of where you could use this in the exam, let's say you're writing a letter to a friend. Quick reminder here, phrasal verbs are informal. We often use them more in speaking or informal writing. In the essay, maybe try not to use too many of them because, like I said, they're informal. Your essay is semi-formal. But in a letter to a friend, definitely use lots of phrasal verbs because it would sound quite natural. For example, I'm quite stressed at the moment. I fell behind with my coursework and I'll have to ask for an extension. Okay, so maybe you've been asked to write a letter to a friend about university or something like that. Okay, so fall behind for work or for study if you're not doing something fast enough. Okay. And our final phrasal verb for the topic of studying or education is catch up on. Which is to do something that you've missed. So let's say you fall behind on your coursework, right? You've missed the deadline for your coursework. So once you fall behind, then you have to catch up. You have to try and do all of that work or all of that study that you missed before. For example, if let's say we've got a speaking part 2 question, you're talking about one of the photos, you could say, the woman in the second photo might be studying late to catch up on assignments she missed. Okay. So again, you catch up on assignments, catch up on work, catch up on emails, catch up on studying, catch up on grammar, homework, anything that you didn't do that you should have, you catch up on that thing. All right, so they are our 4 phrasal verbs for studying. I'm going to give you a quick test now. Okay, let's see if you were listening and if you remember what those phrasal verbs mean. So I need you to fill this gap with one of the phrasal verbs that we just looked at. Okay, again, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to try and fill it. You can write a comment if you want. Write the answer in the comments if you think you know what it is. Okay, so which phrasal verb fits this gap? We have brush up on, fall behind, catch up on, or go over. Your sentence is, I was sick and had to take a few days off work, so I with my emails. Okay, what do you think it is? Remember, you might have to change the tense here as well because we're talking in past tense. So you'll have to change the tense of those phrasal verbs as well, so watch out there. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Take a look. Write in the comments if you think you know what it is. Off you go. Alright, your 5 seconds are up. What do you reckon? What goes in that gap? I was sick and had to take a few days off work, so I fell behind with my emails. Okay, so you weren't fast enough. Okay, you didn't do those emails when you should have. Okay. Alright, so there are 4 phrasal verbs for studying and education. Before we move on to our next topic though, I've got a little tip for you. If you wanted to practice speaking, or if you want to practice any of these phrasal verbs in speaking as well, there's a really great app that you can download. It's called 5 Minute English, and it gives you B2 speaking questions, part 1, 2, 3, and 4, so you can practice all parts of your speaking exam. Basically, you just record yourself answering the questions, and then you get automatic grammar and vocabulary corrections. And you also get suggestions as well, so it might suggest some phrasal verbs that you could use if you forgot to use them in your speaking task. There's thousands of B2 speaking tasks on there. It's really useful. And you get a free trial as well. So you can talk for 5 minutes in your free trial. And then if you find it useful, then you can subscribe if you like. I'll put a link up here. I'll also put a link in the description as well, so you can download that. Have a practice with your speaking. Moving on, we're going to look at a different topic now, work. Okay, so another really common topic in your B2 Cambridge exam. So our first phrasal verb here is take on, which means to hire somebody or to give somebody a job. Okay, super common phrasal verb. Instead of hire, we would say take on. How could you use this in the exam? Maybe in a report, for example. Okay, if you're giving recommendation or suggestion, to put taking on more staff would be recommended in order to give current staff a better work-life balance. So hiring more staff. Again, one word synonym, quite simple. You can just switch it over in your brain there. Instead of hire, say take on. You'll get more points and you'll sound more natural. Right, that's number 1. Number 2 for work is burnout. You might have heard this. You might even say this in your native language. Often this is borrowed from English, and in a lot of languages they use burnout anyway. If you burn out, you exhaust yourself from work. So you work too hard and then you feel really exhausted, or maybe you get sick. We could use this in speaking if your topic is work or they ask you about work. For example, if they asked you in part 4 speaking, is work-life balance important? You can say, yeah, absolutely. Without a good work-life balance, most people would be in danger of burning out. Okay, so that's one example. You could also maybe use it in writing as well, maybe an essay, report like we saw before, that might be useful as well, or an informal letter again. All right, moving on. So our next one is lay off, which means to fire somebody or to take somebody's job away. So before we had hire somebody, what was the phrasal verb for hire? Can you remember? It was to take on. Take somebody on means hire. Lay somebody off means fire. It's the opposite. So you take their job away. So let's take a look at another keyword transformation again, because this is where they often test you on your phrasal verbs. So your sentence is, the company fired many workers over the last year. You've got off, so we know it's probably a phrasal verb. And then we've got many workers the last year. All right, so this is another tip for you for keyword transformation. Always look where your subject and your object are. So if your object has suddenly moved to the start of your sentence, like it has here, if we take a look, your object in this sentence is the workers. And all of a sudden, it's moved to the start of your sentence. So if your object starts your sentence, what does that tell you about the grammar? Tells you that you need a passive form, because in passive forms, objects start the sentence and often subjects are not included. Okay, and we can also see that our subject of company has disappeared from the sentence. Okay, so this tells you that you need a passive form and you need a phrasal verb as well. All right, so now that you know what the passive form is and you know what the phrasal verb is, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to try and answer this question. Okay, off you go. All right, your 5 seconds are up. What do you reckon? What did you put for this keyword transformation task? Many workers were laid off over the last year. Okay, so like we said, we needed a passive form, so you need to add to be, and then the past participle of lay, which is laid. And there we go, were laid off over the last year. Okay. All right, so we've got one more to look at for work then, which is take on again. So do you remember at the start of this video, I said one reason why phrasal verbs are so difficult is because they have so many meanings depending on the context. Take on is one of those verbs. It has multiple meanings. We looked at it already, which meant to hire somebody. You take on staff. It also has a second meaning, which is to take extra responsibility. Okay. For example, let's take a look in speaking part 2. Again, if you're comparing a photo, you could say, for example, the man in the first photo appears to be very stressed. Perhaps he has taken on too much work and can't meet his deadline. So we would often take on work, take on responsibility, and take on a challenge. Okay, so if you take on something, you take extra, either responsibility or work, we would often use it with. Okay. All right, so they are our 4 for work. Again, let's have a quick test. Let's see if you were listening, you can remember those phrasal verbs. So which phrasal verb fits this gap? Take on in its 2 different meanings, burnout or lay off. We've got the company lost too much money last year, and as a result, some staff were. Okay, so have a think. I'll give you 5 seconds again. Write a comment if you think you know what the answer is. You've got 5 seconds off, you don't. All right, your 5 seconds are up. What do you reckon? What did you get? Company lost too much money last year, and as a result, some staff were laid off. Okay, they were fired. Their jobs were taken away from them. Right. Take on doesn't work, because if your company loses money, you would not hire more staff or give people jobs. Burnout. it could fit, but lay off makes more sense, I would say, in this context. All right, so that's work done. That's our second topic finished. Our next topic is relationships. So this is really common in your B2 exam, definitely in speaking part 1. Often they ask you the question, tell me about your family. So a nice one to use for this one is to get along with or to get on with, which just means that you have a good relationship with somebody. Okay. So if they ask you the question, tell me about your family, you could say something like, I would say we're quite close. I get on pretty well with my sister, even though she can be a bit annoying sometimes. Okay. So I get on well. I have a good relationship with my sister. Okay. You could also use this in part 3 and part 4 as well. It's a really common phrasal verb. Just means to have a good relationship with. Okay. All right, next up for relationships, another keyword transformation for you. So our next one is to fall out with, which just means to argue with somebody. You argue with them and you kind of stop talking to them or stop being friends with them for a while because of the argument. Okay, so it's a little bit more complex than just argue. It's like you argue and then you just stop having a relationship with them temporarily, let's say. So if you had this kind of question in the keyword transformation, sometimes teenagers and their parents have arguments over curfews. You've got the word fall. We know that that replaces arguments or argue. And then we've got sometimes teenagers over curfews. So we need to replace and their parents have arguments with fall. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 seconds again. As usual, take a look. Try and figure out what the answer is here. Okay, you've got 5 seconds, off you go. All right, your 5 seconds are up. What did you go for? So you need to be careful here because you could see that here you've got arguments, which is a noun, but you're using a verb, fall out with. So you need to change the sentence structure a little because we're using a verb instead of a noun. So the answer was sometimes teenagers fall out with their parents over curfews. Okay, so we just had to change the structure around slightly, but most of the words are pretty much the same, to be fair. All right, next one for relationships then is make up with. So you would do this after you fall out with somebody because you would reconcile with that person or you would start, being friends again. You say sorry and you start being friends again with that person. So after you fall out with someone, then you make up with them. Okay. So how could you use it? Maybe in speaking part 2, for example, if you're describing, comparing a photo, say, the couple in the first photo, they might have argued, but they seem ready to make up with each other. So you could say make up with each other, or you could say make up with him, make up with her, depending on who you've had the argument with. Here you could also use fall out with instead of argue. So the couple in the first photo might have fallen out, but they seem ready to make up, so then you've got 2 phrasal verbs in one sentence. That would be quite nice if you could do that in the exam. All right, so that's make up with, and next up we've got take after, another really common phrasal verb, which means to be similar to, someone, usually in your family. It could either be in appearance or also personality as well. Okay, so again, if they ask you that question, tell me about your family. You could say, oh, well, I really take after my mum in terms of personality. We're both quite outgoing. So you could say, oh, I take after my dad because we've got the same eyes. Or I take after my mum because we're both outgoing. So personality or appearance if you're similar to someone in your family. Normally your parents. All right, time for another test. Let's see if you were listening to those last 4 phrasal verbs we looked at. So our phrasal verbs were get on with, fall out with, make up with, and take after. So you need to put one of those phrasal verbs in this sentence. Again, put a comment, write the answer in the comments if you think you know what it is. We've got they were friends for years, but then they suddenly, and they haven't spoken since. Okay, You've got 5 seconds. Off you go. Alright, your 5 seconds are up. What do you reckon? They're friends for years, but then they suddenly fell out. And they haven't spoken since. Okay? They had an argument and they stopped talking. And they haven't spoken since. Right. Okay, next topic. Okay, our next topic, technology, another really common topic in your B2 exam. So our first phrasal verb for technology is backup. Again, you might have this in your language. This is often a borrowed word from English in other languages. If you back something up, you make a copy of it. We often use this for data, photographs, okay? How could you use this? Let's say you're writing an article, for example. You're giving people advice or about computers or some article about technology. You could say, okay, you could write, always back up your files to avoid losing important data. You never know what might happen. All right, so you can use it in an article. You could also use it in an informal letter as well. Okay, so backup, you can back up files, back up data, back up photos, back up a hard drive. By the way, if you do want a list of these phrasal verbs, I'll put a PDF in the description for you, along with a set of flashcards as well. If you want them, they're there. They're completely free. Click that link and you can download them there. And you can just use Quizlet, really great app, another free app, to help you learn the 20 phrasal verbs from today's lesson. So have a look. I'll put the link there. Take a look and you can download that there. Moving on, our next technology phrasal verb is set up. So if you set something up, you prepare it to be used. Okay, we often use this for computers. Let's say you bought a new computer. You have to set up the monitor. You have to set up the desktop, the keyboard, everything. You have to turn it on. You have to update it. All of that process is setting up. Okay. If you want to use it in the exam, maybe in speaking, for example, let's say speaking part 3, I don't know, you have to choose to buy your friend a present, some kind of technology or device or something like that. And you could say, I think the smartphone would be a better option because the computer could take much longer to set up, could take much longer to prepare. So you can use it as a synonym for prepare, basically. All right, next one. Another keyword transformation. So we've got shut down. You might know this if you use computers regularly. If your computer is in English, you'll have the option to shut down the computer, which means to stop operating. When a computer stops operating, it shuts down. All right, for example, we've got the server will stop operating at 10 a.m. on Sunday for maintenance. And you've got down, which we know is part of shutdown. And then we've got the server by tech support at 10 a.m. on Sunday for maintenance. Okay, so we need to look carefully if we've got by here, by tech support. So often when you have by, that tells you that you need a passive form, because we often use by with passives. So you're going to need some kind of passive form and your verb as well, your phrasal verb. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Again, have a look. Write in the comments if you think you know what the answer is. Off you go. All right, your 5 seconds are up. What did you get? The server will be shut down. So I know I said before, take a look at your subject and your object, but in this case, shut down can be used in a transitive way or intransitive. So something can shut down, or someone can shut down something. We can use it in both ways. Okay. So the server will be shut down by tech support, passive form, passive future. Simple. All right. And another one for technology, to scroll through. If you scroll through something, you just continuously scroll on your phone. Okay, so you just like scroll through something. So this would be good to use in speaking, maybe speaking part 4, if they ask you the question, what are the disadvantages of social media? You could say something like, in my view, social media can be very harmful. People spend hours a day scrolling through Instagram or TikTok instead of actually living. Okay, so you would scroll through a website, scroll through an app, scroll through your phone. All right, so that's our 4 for technology. Again, quick test. Let's see if you can remember those. Okay, so our phrasal verbs were back up, set up, shut down, and scroll through. I'm going to give you 5 seconds again. Let's take a look. What fits in this gap? We lost a year's worth of data because they forgot to something the main logs. Okay, you've got 5 seconds. All right, what do you reckon? Which phrasal verb goes in that gap? They lost a year's worth of data because they forgot to back up the main logs. Okay, backup means to make a copy of data, usually. All right, so our final topic then is the environment. Again, super common in your B2 exam, the environment. Our first phrasal verb is to wipe out something, which means that you completely destroy something. Okay, it could be a species of animal, it could be an area of land. Okay, that's how we often use it when we're talking about the environment. And this would be useful for your essay. Again, if you get a question on the environment for your essay, you could say, for example, if global warming is not taken seriously, entire towns could be wiped out by flooding. Okay, entire towns could be completely destroyed by flooding. Right. So really useful for your essay. You could use this in a report as well. You could also use it in speaking, depending on the question. All right. Our next one, the keyword transformation, is phase out. So if you phase something out, you gradually stop using that thing. Like, for example, single-use plastic, okay, or plastic bags, like plastic carrier bags in supermarkets have been phased out. Okay, so people use them less and less. Hopefully in the future they won't be used at all. Let's take a look at our keyword transformation task. So our sentence is, we should stop using single-use plastics over the next decade. We've got out. We know that that's part of phase out. Ooh, look here. Single-use plastics. Look. Your object has suddenly switched to the front of your sentence. You know what that means. Shouldn't have to tell you, because I've already told you once. So we've got single-use plastics, something over the next decade. You've got 5 seconds. Take a look. Write in the comments if you think you know the answer. Off you go. All right, your 5 seconds are up. What did you get? Single-use plastics should be phased out over the next decade. Okay, so we still needed to use should, but we had to change it into a passive form and then add our phrasal verb in. All right. So phase out, to gradually stop using something. Okay. Next up, die out. We've got a lot of phrasal verbs with out for environment. If something dies out, it becomes extinct. So we only use this really for species, like species of animal, humans. You can use it for languages as well, actually. If a language stops being spoken completely, it dies out. Maybe like popular things could die out when people stop listening to a certain music or something like that. But we often use it more with the environment. For example, if you're writing a report, you're giving a recommendation. You could say it's advisable to protect local wildlife habitats to ensure that endangered species don't die out. Okay. So that's how we would use that one, so that they don't become extinct. All right, next up, to run out of. This is really common. You really should know this verb, actually. just because it's so useful, because you could use it for everything, not necessarily environment. You can use it for anything. So run out of means when you finish a supply of something. Okay. So for example, you can run out of money. If you finish your money, you don't have any money now, you run out of money, run out of water, run out of energy. If you're completely exhausted, you've run out of energy, run out of patience, run out of food. Anything that you finish a supply of, you run out of that thing. Okay, really useful phrasal verb. Very common as well. So we could use this in speaking. If you get asked a question, what are some dangers of climate change? You could answer. I'd say there's quite a few, but the most important one is water. If climate change gets worse, we might run out of water soon. So we can use it in that way. Alright, and that's our final one then for environment and our final one of this video, but I still need to test you on those last 4. So we had 4 phrasal verbs: wipe out, phase out, die out, and run out of. And this is your sentence. So after trying to protect the species for many years, there should be an S there. For many years, the white rhino eventually something. What do you reckon goes there? I'll give you 5 seconds. Off you go. Alright, you're out of time. What do you reckon? The white rhino eventually died out, became extinct. Alright, so there you go. They are your 20 common phrasal verbs to use in your Cambridge B2 exam. Again, if you want a list of these phrasal verbs and flashcards, I'll put that link in the description for you. You can download it there for free. If you found this video useful, please do give it a like. It really helps it, to reach more people so that they can prepare for their Cambridge exam as well. And it just lets me know that I'm doing something right so that I can make more videos like this for you. If there's anything in particular about the Cambridge B2 exam that you need help with, any videos that you'd like me to make, let me know in the comments and I'll get some made for you. And any questions as well, if you have any questions about the exam, let me know and I'll try to help you. And that's all for me for today. See you in another video soon.